Hello, welcome to Marissa Reads. I'm Deja, and today we are going to do the Are We Compatible book tag. This tag was created at Kayla's Bookish Vibes, which of course I'll link down below. I thought this was just a very creative way to just share some of our favorite books and see if any of these books are some of your favorites and see if we are compatible in terms of our reading taste. I was debating whether or not I was going to do this tag because as I was thinking about it, it was just so hard for me to come up with books that I was actually enjoying and books that I would say represent my taste in books. And I think that's just like the last few years clouding my judgment, because as I was looking at my bookshelf, there were quite a few books that I absolutely enjoyed when I read them, and I feel like they accurately represent my reading taste. This tag is split up by genres, and you're just going to basically say a few favorites that you have in each genre. So the first one that I'm going to do is classics, and I'm not a very big classics person. I hardly ever read them, but the one that I think really stood out to me that I always go back to is Macbeth. I don't even like Shakespeare, but I love the story of Macbeth. I don't know what it is about this story that actually stands out to me, but it really got me into like darker fiction. Like I really love like dark fantasy. I love like political corruptness. I love morally great characters, and I feel like this isn't necessarily like a fantasy, but I really loved the darker elements of this story, and it's probably a plus. I could probably understand it a lot better than like a lot of them. Like I still don't know A Midsummer's Night's Dream, and I don't really care to. But Macbeth, I really did enjoy it. Moving on to historical fiction. This is another genre that I usually have a good time reading, although I don't usually have like 5-star reads, but there are two that I have on this list that I really enjoyed. So the first one is Daughters of Jubilation. I cannot scream about this book enough. This is really a blend of fantasy and historical, and I think you'll see as I go through all of these books, a lot of the books that I really enjoy, they blend genre elements, and I don't know what it is about that, but I just really love it. And this one, Daughters of Jubilation, you're following this teenage girl, and it's taking place during the summer of a Jim Crow South, and it is so emotionally heartbreaking, and it is just one of my favorite reads that I think I've ever read in the historical fiction genre. I still think about that book. I'm still hurt by the ending of that book, but I think just like my strong emotional pull towards just like the characters, the things that are happening, and just them giving me like the summer vibes of it being like super hot, going to like a cookout, hanging out with like friends and stuff. Like I really enjoyed it. The next one that I have is The Nightingale, and I distinctly remember reading this book. It was so cold outside. Like it was like a January, February, and we were snowed in, and I was just listening to snow on the background, because why wouldn't I listen to snow on the TV when it's already snowing outside? But I was listening to this book while I was just snowed in. My husband was doing something, and I was just reading this book. I think this author's writing is just very immersive. Like I just felt sucked into the story. Like it's so atmospheric, and I'm not gonna say I love the characters, but it's really just like a character journey following these two women during World War II, I believe. Is this World War II? Yes, this is World War II, and I feel like we get way too many of those stories, to be honest, but this one definitely stood out to me. I really enjoyed this author's writing, and I cannot wait to read more by them. Now let's move in to just like the romance general fiction section. I didn't really have enough of both to just warrant its own separate genre, so I'm just gonna put them together. And the first one is a romance, and this is Careless Whispers by Synithia Williams. I absolutely love this. This is actually the third book in the series, and I couldn't wait to read this character's love story. I think what really made this like stood out to me is because she is like another character character that's just kind of like misunderstood. She almost gives me like the strong Black woman stereotype, and it's only because of people's outside perception of her that I knew that there was going to be more to the story. She's the older sister, and she's seen as like always having it together, and when she doesn't really show her emotions like that, people just think that she's just like not cruel, but just not as emotionally available. Like her younger sister is almost like scared of her because there's drama in the first book that happens with the character's ex-husband and her sister, and I don't know, like it was just family drama all around. But this is the character that I was just like, I want a deeper dive into this character. I want to see her being emotionally open to the love interest and just seeing that background of her, and that is exactly what I got, and I loved it. The next romance that I have is one that I recently read, and this is Curvy Girl Summer. I knew that this book was going to be a whole vibe for me because I just felt it in my heart. And I was happy that I was right in how much I really enjoyed this one. I think with romances, for me, I'm not one that likes like the super steamy reads, and don't get me wrong, like this one still had those scenes, but it wasn't like pervasive through the entire book. You're really getting these characters hanging out and really getting to know each other, and of course there's like banter and all of that. I just thought that the two characters were very cute, and I just really love the summer vibe of this. I really like the confidence of this main character. I also just really liked the representation of just a Black family in this. I think they have a very strong family unit, and there's even like a strong friendship aspect of this as well, which I really appreciated. So there's just like a lot going on in this book that I just really enjoyed. But in romances, I really just love like banter, and I love that it's not like too steamy, and I love that like you're actually seeing the characters like building a relationship with each other and getting to know each other. I will admit that towards the end, the main character was starting to annoy me, but it was still great all around. The next one that I have, I wouldn't necessarily call it a romance, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's general fiction either. And this is one of my nostalgia reads. Like, I know this book has not aged well at all, but I absolutely love it. And this book is Upgrade You by Nini Simone. I read pretty much every book by Nini Simone when I was a kid, and I loved it. This book is messy, and I absolutely love messy books. I don't know what it is, but the drama always gets me hooked, and this book definitely has drama. This book is actually the sequel to Shorty Like Mine, and they all follow the same character, Seven. This book is actually the one where she's going to college and she's with her boyfriend, and there's like a little bit of a love triangle. Of course, there's drama happening. The main character, Seven, is not really likable at all, but I was still highly entertained reading this, and I could reread this book all the time because it's just very messy, and I think this is a good representation of the mess I kind of like to read, so I had to include it on this list. The last book that I'll have in this romance general fiction section is The Other Woman. I read this earlier in 2024, and I absolutely love this book. Like, my heart was so torn reading this book, and I love it. I like messy books, and this book does have like messiness in it just because of the cheating aspect and all of that. But I think also what really made this book stand out to me is just that emotional connection that I had towards it. Like, I went on such an emotional roller coaster reading this book, and that is like top tier what makes a book a 5-star read to me, and this book definitely had that. I still think about that ending, and I just, gosh, I love it so much. And I also think that just like the creativeness of the author not even naming the character, and I didn't even realize that until I was like looking at like other reviews, and yeah, this character doesn't have a name, but just like those literary like devices and just just being creative with how they tell the story, I think, is another thing that really makes me enjoy a book. And that's why I really, really enjoyed this book. Now, let's move on to like thriller horror books. So the first one I have to mention is Gone Girl. I really do think that this really got me into like domestic thriller type of things, and I absolutely love this book. I rewatch the movie all the time, and I haven't done a reread in a while of the book, but the movie and the book are very similar to each other. And oh gosh, Gillian Flynn is just like one of those authors that I feel like I could read anything that they write. Although there's like one book that they wrote that like it's a little too dark for me, and I said that I like dark fiction, but they have like a cult aspect of it, and I could not. I was like, let me just step back from this, because she goes there and I like her for that. In Gone Girl, you're following this missing woman who was married to this bar owner, and it's basically like a search on like what happened to her. She's the child of like a famous author duo, and yeah, it just becomes like this big thing, and the husband is suspected of her murder. I won't go into too much depth about like why I really like this, because there's like a twist in it that I just really liked, and also the ending was just kind of like a bitter ending, and I really like those. Like I said, like I like darker fiction, and this one is definitely that, and it's not really like a happy ending, and I like that. Like I don't like super happy endings, maybe like a bittersweet ending, because I really like The Other Woman too, because that was also kind of like a bittersweet ending. But Gone Girl was just not like a happy ending at all, and I loved it. The next one that I have is Ring Shot by P. Djeli Clark, and I really like this author's like novellas, but this is the one that like really stood out to me. This is a horror that's like an alternate like history with like magical elements, and it has like the Ku Klux Klan as like these terrifying beasts, and you're basically following this like band of like hunters that like hunt them down and stuff. And I really enjoyed this. This was like terrifying for me, but like very entertaining. And again, like I really like those like genre blends, because you have like this like alternate history, but then you also have the magical elements like put into that, and it's just very speculative. And I just really like just when like books make me like think about like just alternate futures and just alternate histories and all of that. So I really, really did enjoy this one. And then one of my favorite authors is River Solomon, who wrote Sorrowland. I was trying to decide if I liked this book better or if I liked An Unkindness of Ghosts better. And I feel like I low-key like this one a little bit better than An Unkindness of Ghosts, but both of them are still like very amazing. But this one is another like genre blend. You're following this teenage mother. I believe she's a teenager, if I remember correctly, and it kind of has like this like body horror element of it. This is in like a contemporary setting, but the body horror element of this was very interesting. And then there's also like a church aspect of this that's like almost critiquing the church and just like the cult aspect of the church that she was in. And yeah, it was very interesting. Like I still don't know what to make of this book, and yeah, like I think that's why I really like River Solomon's work, and just like work like this in general, just because like if I'm still pondering about it, like I think it's just living in my head like rent free, and I think that's why like I really, really enjoy books like this. And now we're getting to my two favorite genres, and that is sci-fi and fantasy. So let's start off with the fantasy, and the first one that I'm going to mention is Upon a Burning Throne. And this one is definitely an epic fantasy based off of the Mahabharata, which is an Indian oh, I'm blanking on the word. It's not like the Odyssey. What is it? I'll put the word on the screen, but that's what it is. And I really, really enjoyed this. I really love when like mythology is incorporated into a world. I love when I'm really connected to the characters, and you're following a huge cast of characters in this, including the gods themselves. And I really, really loved it. I didn't really think that I would be like an epic fantasy kind of person, especially because most of them I find very boring, but this one definitely was a 5-star read for me, and I think it was because of that incorporation of the gods, and there's also the characters of this story were like very interesting, and just, you could see everybody's like motivations and everybody like trying to go to where they need to go, and I loved it. I love this so much. Another one that I have is The Betrayals by Richard Collins. This one, I was not sure that I would love it in the end, because at the beginning of the story, like I was struggling to get into this, but there was a reveal at the end of this book that I was just like, oh my gosh, like I love that. And yeah, I think when like I remember distinctly stuff about like what happened in the book, and it just like, oh, like, oh my gosh, like I don't know, like I just really enjoy it, but I also just really think that the world that was created in this was very interesting. It's set in like a school setting, and it definitely had like those like school elements of it. I think it's pitched as like dark academia, and I wouldn't say this is necessarily like fantasy, or maybe like alternate history or something, because it's not really like magical. I don't remember it being like that, but I don't know. I really enjoyed this. Again, like I'm a very character driven reader now, and this one, because of that character reveal, I was in love with it, and I just really liked being in this world and following these two characters, because it's kind of like a push and pull relationship, and I really enjoyed that. The next one that I have is The Wrath of the Dawn. I read this when I was in high school, and I really just enjoyed it. This is like a retelling of 1001 Nights, and I really did enjoy that kind of story. I think Shahrazad, I believe this character's name is, she decides that she's going to become the bride of the caliph, even though all of them die, because she wants to save somebody that she cares about. And of course, that's the story of the 1001 Nights. But I think where this story like differed for me is that I really enjoyed the characters of this one, and there's kind of like an outside like plot happening that I really enjoyed. There's another character that was on the outside plotting like a rebellion kind of thing that I really enjoyed, and I really like him. And so yeah, I really just enjoyed this one. The next one that I have is Heavy as the Head, Love and War. I reread this one recently, and while I acknowledge that this does not have like the best fantasy elements and not necessarily the best romantic elements, that's not what I really liked about this book. I really love angsty stories, and I feel like this author does it so well. Like the romantic tension between these two characters was just, oh, I loved it so much. Like I want like my heart to be like pulling for them and like wanting them to be together, and I feel like with this author, like I get that. Now there was like a needless love triangle. I don't know why, but there was a love triangle in this, but that wasn't really like a love triangle. But just the emotional pull of the main relationship that you know she's gonna end up with anyway was just so good, and I love it for that. And the last one that I'll mention for fantasy is of course the 5th season, because N.K. Jemisin is like the best fantasy author. This one is another like genre blend. It is science fantasy, I would say, and it is taking on like oh gosh, what is the word? Not geography, but I cannot like think of words today. But it's when they're like studying the earth, and she puts like a sci-fi fantasy like spin on it, and I really enjoyed that. I think also with the story, like you have her doing interesting things, so like the writing, it is told in like second person, but then there's also like just different timelines, and then the way that it connects at the end was just top tier. So again, another example of an author doing something creative with the way that they're writing a story, and I just really love that. Plus this is a very like character driven story. You're really just following these 3 different characters who show you different aspects about the world, and while that can be like slow at times, I really did enjoy this, and so I definitely need to get to the next ones because I just know they're going to be just as great. And now for the last section, let's do sci-fi, and the first one that I have for that is Cinder. When I first read this one, I DNF'd it, but Cinder definitely grew on me. I love the fairy tales, and I just really like that the author did like a sci-fi twist on this, because the main character Cinder is, I think she's like an android, or like half android, half human, and it's a play on the story of Cinderella. And so of course she goes to like a ball and all this other stuff, but there's all of these like sci-fi elements and stuff happening in the background, and you have like the villain Queen Lavanna, and I really enjoy just the creative aspect of the story. I think the first one is definitely my favorite so far. I still have yet to read the last book in this series, but I really enjoyed just being in this world, and I really cannot wait to finish the series. The next one that I have is Legend by Marie Lu. This is the first book that I ever read by Marie Lu, and she immediately became like an author that I absolutely loved. And this one is a dystopian society. I can't even tell you like much about it because I honestly forgot, but you're following these two characters, and their relationship to each other is just very interesting to me. Like, I remember the ending of the series so vividly. How we got there, I cannot tell you, but the ending of the entire series, I remember like my heart was just like, oh my gosh, like, oh my gosh. And I just really like when books do that. So I definitely need to reread this to see like what even happens. But it definitely made Marie Lu an auto buy in my teenage brain. But Marie Lu also has like this very like TV style writing that just makes me feel like I'm in the world very well, and it just makes me feel like I'm watching a movie, and I absolutely love that about her writing. So yeah, definitely love this series. Continuing on with my dystopian kind of era vibe is The Hunger Games. I love The Hunger Games. I don't know why people liked Divergent at all, but The Hunger Games, I love it so much. Like, it was just so mind-boggling to me to see all of these like teens being drafted to just like to these games, and just like all the politics happening with this, and just everything. Like, I really love this, and I was like, this is exactly what dystopian and sci-fi could be. And oh gosh, I love it. Like, I still have like the Hunger Games posters. The movies came out around like my birthday every single year, and so I went to see the movies every single time around my birthday for my birthday, because gosh, like, I just really love The Hunger Games. And the last one that I'll mention is Dawn by Octavia Butler. This is the complete collection, so it's The Littlest Brood, but the first book is Dawn, and I really enjoyed that one. It was my introduction into Octavia Butler, and I didn't really see myself as like a straight sci-fi person until I read this book. And I don't know, I think Octavia Butler is like one of those authors that packs a punch in such a short amount of time, and I wish a lot of other authors would do that nowadays. But yeah, like, she always had these weird relationships, and this one, you have a relationship with an alien and the main character, and these aliens are basically like helping them to like stay alive because they ruined their planet. And I don't know, like, this was like pure like thought-provoking for me, because I had never really read a book like it before, and I don't think I've ever read a book like it since that's not by Octavia Butler. And so she always does these like interesting like things with like relationships, and just really making me think about like humanity in general, which I think is what sci-fi kind of tries to do, at least like the thought-provoking sci-fi, because there's also just a very action-driven sci-fi. But yeah, this is a very interesting story for me, and I think it's a very good representation of sci-fi and like what I like in sci-fi, so that's why I included it on this list. But that wraps up all of the books that I think represent my taste very well. I'm very curious to see if like we are compatible in terms of like our reading taste. And of course, if we are, or if you have any recommendations for me, I would definitely love them, because like I said in the beginning, like I have not been having like a very good like 5-star new favorite kind of reading year. And while I did have a few that I mentioned, like Curvy Girl Summer and The Other Woman, like those aren't really in like my favorite genres. And so I really would like sci-fi and fantasy recommendations if you have them, if they like align with like the taste that I just mentioned. So yeah, I thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.